The United States has once again reiterated its warning that Russia could invade Ukraine at any moment. This as talks on the highest levels between the West and Russia continue in a bid to defuse the situation, which in recent days have heightened dramatically. In the latest, Ukraine has called for a meeting with Russia and other signatories to the Vienna Document within 48 hours. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said Russia had ignored formal requests to explain the build-up of troops, and the next step was meeting face-to-face to get transparency about Russia's plans. Meanwhile, in what amounts to a major concession, the BBC quoted Ukraine's ambassador to United Kingdom saying that Kyiv could drop its bid to join NATO to avoid a war with Russia. When asked if Kyiv could change its position on NATO membership, he said, and I quote, "We might, especially being threatened like that, blackmailed like that, and pushed to it." Ambassador Vadim Pristaiko told the BBC that Ukraine was willing to be flexible on the issue, a move that Moscow has said will be a trigger for war. On Sunday, US President Joe Biden briefed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in an hour-long call about the conversation he had with Russia's Putin. That call between Biden and Putin did not achieve any breakthrough. Zelensky's office said that President Biden was issued an invitation to visit Kyiv in the coming days to show moral support and also deliver a powerful signal to Russia. But Washington made no mention of this invitation in its readout of the call. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan issued a rather grim assessment, warning that an invasion could begin any day now and would likely start the significant barrage of missiles and bomb attacks. At the same time, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has arrived in Kyiv in the latest bid by European leaders to defuse tensions. He will also visit Moscow tomorrow. Well, for more on this, joining us live from Moscow is our correspondent, Stuart Smith. Stuart, good to see you and welcome to this broadcast. What is causing this confusion about an imminent invasion? On one end, the U.S. insists that Russia could attack Ukraine at any moment, while Russia maintains it has no intentions to invade.
That's right. And Ukraine and France, countries you might expect to be on the same page as the United States on this matter, are also not quite as concerned as the United States and the United Kingdom are. The difference seems to be an interpretation of the analysis, with all these Western countries having access to the same intelligence, but the United States making the point that an invasion cannot simply now be ruled out, and the timing of which cannot be known, despite Russian military forces being in a position, the United States says, to invade. The United States then reading the intelligence signals to suggest an invasion could happen at any point, but there being nothing else for other countries to interpret the build-up as a potential invasion. And so you have a situation where Russia could, but isn't yet, and some countries say doesn't intend to, invade imminently. That seems to be the working style of Ukraine at the moment, which, although does and is of course very aware of the Russian build-up, of what's going on near its borders, is not taking the immediate imminent precautions you might expect from a country about to be invaded. The capital continues as normal, but with additional warning systems and preparations in place should an invasion occur. The United States says that it does consider an invasion imminent based on its intelligence, that it could happen any day. The question, of course, is will it? And the United States and nobody else knows, apart from perhaps Russian President Vladimir Putin himself. It's not clear what Russia's aims would necessarily be if it were to invade, or what it would hope to gain. Negotiations and diplomacy are still ongoing with, as you said, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in Kiev today and in Moscow on Tuesday, which means that not all hope is potentially lost in terms of the negotiation and diplomacy path.
Let's talk about that. The diplomatic forays made by world leaders. Critics argue that Macron's tour diplomacy did not yield any results. Does the trip by Chancellor Olaf Scholz look promising?
It's further evidence that potentially the European countries are looking towards the Normandy format of meetings as the only possible diplomatic path forward in terms of coming to some resolution here. Both Germany and France, the two Western European nations, as part of that Normandy grouping, with Ukraine and Russia there too. However, we saw last week that there wasn't much progress when low-level talks happened amongst diplomats in this format. There wasn't any obvious route forward. However, the fact that German Chancellor and now the French President together will have been in Moscow in the last few weeks does indicate some willingness to talk amongst Russia's elite and in the Kremlin, with President Vladimir Putin saying that he's happy to talk with any world leader about what to do in Ukraine. There was that invitation as well from Ukraine, clearly still interested in talking as well, inviting Joe Biden, the US President, to Ukraine, but unlikely that's going to happen with the risks right now so high as they are.
Finally, Stuart, some countries have voiced concerns over China's silence on the matter. Is this also a concern in Moscow?
Moscow has not been talking directly about this, whether this meeting of the OSCE, this letter that Dmitry Kuleba, the Ukrainian foreign minister, has said there's been no response to. Russia says that it is entitled to move its troops around its territory as it sees fit, and despite Dmitry Kuleba's attempts to try and pin Russia down and get Russia to commit exactly on paper what it's doing with these military drills, now estimated at over 150,000 troops, Russia has chosen not to respond to that letter, and we do not know if Russia will join the meeting that it should be due to attend of the OSCE. And one thing to address, these comments recently from the Ukrainian ambassador in the United Kingdom saying that potentially NATO, joining NATO was indeed on the table for Ukraine, that potentially Ukraine could decide to not apply for NATO. He's now backtracked on that comment. The Ukrainian official position seems to remain that Ukraine is seeking to join NATO. That remains in its constitution, and it seems like that was a slip of the tongue by the ambassador in the United Kingdom.
Live from Moscow, Stuart Smith, thank you very much for talking to us and your insights. We are also being joined by Jager Brylan, who is an international affairs expert from Kyiv. Thank you, Mr. Brylan, for your time, and welcome to WION. Let me begin by asking you, what is your assessment of the situation in Ukraine?
Good afternoon. In Ukraine, we can see the following situation. Russia is threatening our security. Russia have invaded Ukraine in 2014. And now Europe is facing the biggest security threat since the end of the Second World War. And Russia located 140,000 troops near the borders of Ukraine, in Belarus, as well as on occupied territories of Crimea and some parts of Donetsk and Lugansk region. And up for now, we can see that Western countries, countries of NATO and European Union, they help Ukraine. They provide Ukraine with defense weaponry, for example, Javelin anti-tank missiles, also Stingers arrived yesterday from Lithuania, and so we.
Mr. Brylan, thank you very much for talking to WION. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.